Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight we're heading back to Inquisition-era Spain, land of holy zeal, suspicious neighbours, and a justice system so efficient it can kill you without ever telling you what you did. You're not a rebel. You're not a prophet. You're not even particularly interesting, but you are about to become the church's latest theological chew toy. Maybe you skipped mass. Maybe you owned the wrong book. Maybe someone just didn't like your face. Whatever the reason or lack thereof, your soul is now in danger. And lucky you, the Inquisition is here to help. With chains and fire and a very strong sense of divine purpose. Before your fingers get too numb to press buttons, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if you find comfort in softly narrated nightmares. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. I love knowing who's tuning in from around the world. Now close your eyes, take a deep breath, and try not to attract too much attention. You're guilty now. All that's left is to find out why. You didn't think much of it at the time. A passing glance from a neighbour. The way the priest lingered a little longer than usual after Mass. Someone asked if you were feeling all right. Said you looked pale. Strange comment, considering everyone looks pale these days, unless they're bleeding or burning. But it wasn't until a friend stopped talking to you mid-sentence, suddenly remembering somewhere else they needed to be, that you realised something was off. You went home, you closed the shutters, you tried to sleep, and then just like that, you stopped being a person and started being a name, a whisper, a problem to be corrected. It's hard to say what did it. Maybe someone saw you reading something they didn't understand. Latin, perhaps, or Greek, or just anything that wasn't a hagiography or a very dull sermon. Could have been that you asked the wrong question at the wrong time. Something about original sin or indulgences, or why God's messengers seem to own so much property. Or maybe it wasn't anything you did at all. Maybe you were merely adjacent to the wrong conversation, or married to the wrong person, or just happened to be in the way of someone else's ambition. The truth is, it doesn't really matter. You've been accused. And in this particular historical period, accusation is 9/10 of conviction. There will be no moment of confrontation, no official charge. You won't be told what you're guilty of, because the process hasn't reached that stage yet. It may never reach that stage. In fact, if you're lucky, you'll never even know what supposedly damned your soul. The only thing you know, the only thing anyone knows, is that your name was written down. Perhaps in a letter, perhaps on a list, perhaps whispered in the ear of a local inquisitor after Mass, over a cup of wine and a side of casual condemnation. However it happened, the gears are turning now. Slowly, silently, inexorably. You will not hear them move, but you will feel it. You start noticing things. People don't look you in the eye anymore. The baker suddenly doesn't have bread for you, even though he did 10 minutes ago for the man in front of you. The blacksmith avoids your hand when you pay him. Your neighbour pulls her children inside when you pass. And the priest, the same one who baptised your daughter and buried your father, stops smiling when he sees you. His sermons take on a different tone, louder, less forgiving, more fire, less brimstone. You stop attending Mass, not because you've lost faith, but because everyone there looks at you like you already belong to the devil. Of course, not attending Mass is a sin in itself, you know that. Everyone knows that. It's one of the easiest ways to slip from piety to suspicion. But attending is worse now, because every breath, every glance, every twitch of your fingers could be misinterpreted. If you kneel too slowly, it's pride. If you kneel too quickly, it's guilt. If you cry, you're trying too hard. If you don't, you're cold. There is no correct posture, no correct face. You are, in essence, already guilty, and your only real job is to survive long enough to figure out how badly. You start to pray more. At first it's out of fear, then it becomes habit. Eventually, it turns into something else, a kind of compulsive ritual. like checking for a wound you know is already infected. You pray not for deliverance, but for clarity, for a clue, for some hint of what you're being punished for, but there is no voice from the heavens, no divine revelation, just silence, the kind of silence that suggests either God isn't listening, or he is, and he's waiting to see what the Inquisition digs up. You think briefly about fleeing. Plenty have tried. Some made it, most didn't. The problem isn't just the borders or the guards or the weight of your conscience. The problem is that the accusation follows you. It's like a stain. Even if you run, even if you disappear into some other town, there's always someone willing to ask why you left, why you abandoned your home, your family, your faith. The moment you try to escape, you confirm their worst suspicions. And now you're not just a heretic, you're a heretic on the run. At night, you lie in bed listening. Every creak in the wood, every distant footstep, every murmured conversation outside makes your heart seize. You imagine them coming for you, hooded, silent, methodical. You've heard stories, you know how it happens. No knocking, no warning, just a sudden burst of boots on stone, the cold grip of unfamiliar hands, and the end of your life as you knew it. You think about hiding your books, but you're not even sure which ones are dangerous anymore. Last year, the Psalms were safe. This year, someone was arrested for owning a version with too much marginalia. You think about burning them, but that feels like a confession in itself. You no longer trust anyone. Not your friends, not your family, not even yourself. Every thought becomes suspect. Every word feels like bait. You begin to understand what they mean by spiritual warfare, though not in the way the church intended. The battle is between fear and despair, between the hope that maybe they won't come and the dread that they already have, and just haven't told you yet. The worst part is that no one has said a word. You are still technically free, walking the streets, buying food, sleeping in your own bed, but freedom means nothing when it's draped in suspicion. You are not living anymore. You're waiting for the door to creak open, for the chains, for the verdict that was passed the moment someone said your name. This is what the Inquisition does best. Not fire, not torture, not even execution. No, its true genius lies in the silence before the scream. In the weeks, sometimes months, when you remain technically innocent but undeniably damned. It doesn't need to hurt you yet. It just needs you to feel what's coming, to rot from the inside out before they ever touch you. And so you wait, you pray, you watch, you try to act normal, though you don't remember what that looks like anymore. And deep down, a small part of you hopes they do come, because at least then the waiting will be over. Because at least then you'll know what you're dying for. The first thing you hear is the knock. Not loud, not frantic, just firm, repeated twice, then silence. That's the part that really gets to you, the silence. You wait, breath held, willing it to be a dream, or a traveller, or literally anyone else. But deep down, you already know. No one visits at this hour unless they've come to ruin your life. You rise slowly, body trembling before your mind has caught up, and shuffle to the door like a man condemned. You don't open it, not right away. You just press your ear against the wood and listen. You hear leather creak, metal softly clinking, breathing, not hurried, not angry, just businesslike, the kind of breathing that says this isn't personal. You hesitate, thinking maybe if you don't open it, they'll go away. They don't. Instead, the door bursts inward with a crack that echoes through your bones. Hands grab you, not rough, just efficient, 2 on each arm, another on your mouth. You try to shout, but they've already wrapped cloth around your face, then around your eyes. You are now a parcel, a problem to be transported. There is no explanation, no charges, no shouting of rights or holy mandates, just darkness and motion. Your feet scrape the floor as they drag you outside. The air is cold. You notice things. Dirt under your soles, the sound of boots on stone, A distant dog barking, then stopping too quickly. You're loaded into something, a cart you think, and your body sways with the movement as wheels jolt over cobblestones. Your head knocks against something wooden. No one adjusts you. You're not supposed to be comfortable. You're not supposed to be anything at all. Time stretches in the dark. You try to count the turns, the stops, the hills, but it all blends together. Every bump feels the same. Every breath tastes of cloth and fear. You lose track of your position. You lose track of your limbs. Eventually the cart slows, and you're hauled upright again. Your legs don't work properly. You stumble. A hand steadies you, not kindly. More stone beneath your feet now, colder than before. The smell hits you next, rank, wet, fungal. The unmistakable scent of rot that doesn't come from any single thing, but from the accumulation of everything. You're led down. You don't know how many steps, just that there are too many. The air gets heavier. Your breath becomes damp, like you're inhaling through a wet cloth. At some point, the blindfold comes off. Not because they want you to see, but because it doesn't matter anymore. You won't know where you are. You wouldn't even recognize the sky if you could see it. The room you're in, or rather, the space, isn't a room in the normal sense. It's more like a hollow carved into the earth, barely big enough for you to stretch your arms. There's straw on the floor, though calling it straw is generous. It's a mix of chewed grass, lice, and whatever used to be alive but isn't anymore. You're left there. No words, no threats, no prayers. Just the quiet scrape of the door being bolted from the outside. It's not until the silence settles that you realise how loud the fear is. Your heartbeat, your breath, your thoughts, they echo in this space like clumsy invaders. You sit, you lie down. You try to stand again. There is no position that doesn't hurt. The walls are damp. The ceiling drips. Your only company is the faint scuttling of something alive and low to the ground. You decide not to think about what it might be. You wait. Hours, days maybe. Time melts. There is no sun here, no bell, no passage of hours to hold on to. Your body is your only clock now, and it's not a reliable one. Hunger sets in first, a dull twist that sharpens with every breath, then thirst, which becomes more urgent than anything else. Your mouth dries, your tongue sticks. Eventually, someone opens the door and slides a bowl toward you. Water. Bread. That's it. You drink too fast, choke, and spill half of it. No one reacts. The door shuts again. Sleep comes in short bursts. Your dreams are worse than the waking hours because, in them, you remember things. Your house. Your wife. The sound of wind through the olive trees. And then you wake to straw in your mouth and a wet patch at your back, where the wall has started to leak. You don't cry. Not because you're strong, but because crying would take water you don't have. Your eyes burn instead. Quiet, useless pain. You start to think about death, not in a grand, dramatic way, but practically, logically, as a timeline. How long before they forget to feed you? How long before the mold creeps up your lungs? You try to pray, but the words come out wrong. Rehearsed, hollow. You wonder if that's what damned you, saying the Lord's Prayer slightly too quickly one Sunday, or stumbling over the Nicene Creed. You think back on every Mass you ever attended, every cross you made, every time you genuflected half a second too late. Maybe that's what they noticed. Maybe that's what sealed it. The sheer absurdity of it begins to dawn on you. That you, of all people, who paid your tithes, who knelt when you were told, who didn't even own a Bible because you knew better, have ended up here. Eventually someone returns, not to speak, just to look at you. A man in a dark robe, face obscured by the hood. He doesn't ask questions, just watches. He notes something on a piece of parchment and leaves. You were an object, now you're a record, a piece of evidence waiting to be justified. It's the first moment you realise you're no longer being treated as a person. You are now a process. You try not to think about the outside world, the sunlight, the meals, the ordinary sounds of life. But your brain insists. You imagine your neighbours going about their business, pretending they didn't hear anything that night. You imagine your family staring at your empty chair, not daring to ask where you've gone. You imagine the priest lighting a candle for your soul, even as he sharpens the knife for your spirit. The worst part is that you don't even know if you believe anymore. Not in God, he's too distant to blame, but in the system, in the church, in the idea that this is somehow for the greater good. You came into this dark place still clinging to the idea that you'd be proven innocent, that someone would come, that a mistake would be corrected, but no one said your name since the door closed behind you. No one's asked, no one's cared. You're not a soul to be saved, you're a file to be processed, and you're just getting started. The first thing you notice is the size, not of the place itself. You never really see the place, but of your cell. If you stretch out your arms, you can touch both walls without moving your feet. If you sit, your knees brush the door. If you lie down, you have to curl slightly to avoid your ankles knocking against the far stone. The ceiling is low enough that standing feels like an accomplishment. You stop doing it after a while. There's no point. This isn't a place for standing. This is a place for waiting, for breaking, for being reduced to the smallest possible version of yourself. There is no window. Light comes in irregularly, through a slit beneath the door or through a torch-lit corridor that glows once in a while, as if the building itself occasionally remembers you exist. Your only clock is the screaming. Not yours, though that may come later, but from elsewhere. Sometimes close, sometimes far, sometimes interrupted mid-cry, which is worse than the full shriek, because at least those finish. A full scream has punctuation. A choked off one just leaves you wondering whether it ended because the torture stopped or because the lungs did. You start to recognize patterns. A specific rhythm of footsteps means a guard is coming. A different rhythm means they're dragging someone. When the dragging sound ends, the screaming usually starts. You try not to think too hard about it, but you do anyway. You imagine what's happening behind those walls, who's being questioned, what they're being asked, how long they'll last. You begin to understand that you're in something vast, not a single dungeon, but a network, a subterranean archive of misery, tucked beneath churches and palaces and seminaries. No signs, no maps, just an invisible empire of silence and pain. Your cell is yours in name only. It's been used before. You can tell by the scratches on the wall, the dark stains on the floor, and the way the bucket, your toilet, your companion, your shame, smells like it was born here. No one empties it. You learn quickly to place it in the corner farthest from your sleeping spot. Though sleeping spot is generous. It's more like the part of the straw where your back hurts the least. Every few days, maybe more, maybe less, they slide in food, if it can be called that. Bread hard enough to chip a tooth. Water cloudy enough to guess at its previous uses. You eat it. Not because you want to, but because hunger doesn't leave room for pride. You don't speak. Not because you've taken a vow of silence, but because there's no one to talk to. The guards don't answer questions. They don't offer comfort. They don't even offer cruelty. They just exist, shadows with keys. You tried once to ask one where you were. He looked at you like you were a chair trying to start a conversation, then walked away. That's when you understood. You're not a prisoner in the traditional sense. You're a specimen, a subject, something to be processed, examined, filed away. This isn't a prison. It's a filing cabinet full of broken people. The sounds of others filter through the walls. Some sob openly. Some whisper prayers. Others have conversations with people who aren't there. Old lovers, dead children, God. Once, someone started singing. A hymn, you think, though the words were too warped to understand. It didn't last long. You heard shouting, then the sound of something heavy, then silence. That cell has been quiet ever since. You wonder how long it takes for the walls to stop echoing a person's voice after they're gone. Time becomes a theory. Your body doesn't know when it is. You try to sleep, but it's never dark or light enough to feel certain. Your dreams bleed into waking thoughts. You start to lose track of whether something happened yesterday or a week ago. Once, you think you saw a priest through a gap in the door. He was reading something and didn't look up. You stared at him until your eyes ached, willing him to notice, to care, to even acknowledge you. He didn't. The door shut. You never saw him again. Sometimes they move people. You hear chains and shuffling and the low thud of boots on stone. Once the cell next to yours was occupied. You knew because the new prisoner whispered to himself. Not words, just sounds. Reassurance maybe, or madness. It lasted 3 days. On the 4th, he was gone. You never heard the door open. Just silence where once there was someone. It's strange how absence can feel louder than presence. You miss him, though you never knew his name. You try not to think about the upper world, about sun, and food that isn't beige, and people who say your name with kindness. But memory is cruel. It drips in uninvited. The warmth of your wife's hands, the sound of rain on your roof, the exact number of steps from your front door to the town's square. You would give anything to forget them, to erase the contrast. But your brain insists on dragging them in, like an animal parading its kills. You wonder if this is deliberate, if they keep you isolated not to prevent escape, but to sharpen the blade of longing until it cuts your sanity to ribbons. And yet, amid all this, there's no talk of charges. No one has explained what you've done. No one has said the word heretic out loud. Your guilt is assumed, your identity overwritten. You are not yourself anymore. You are a number in a ledger, a potential confession waiting to be squeezed out like bad blood. The longer you sit in this tomb, the more you understand that truth is irrelevant. What matters is narrative. If they say you're guilty, then you are. Whether you believe it or not is just window dressing. You begin to fear the silence less than the alternative. The day someone speaks to you again will not be a day of relief. It will be a beginning of pain, of questioning, of transformation. Until then, you're suspended. Neither living nor dying, just existing in a wet hole beneath a holy empire, waiting for someone to remember you need to be broken. This is the Inquisition's genius, not its cruelty, that's crude and obvious, but its patience, its ability to turn a man into a whisper, then into an echo, then into nothing. The walls press in, not metaphorically, literally. But the real prison is so vast it doesn't need bars. And you're exactly where they want you. There is no warning, no knock, no shout, no sound at all until the door groans open and the light stabs your eyes like punishment for daring to have them. 2 men enter. You recognize them instantly, not as individuals but as a type. Their faces are blank in that terrifying way bureaucracy often is. Not cruel, not angry, just focused, professional in the worst possible sense. They don't speak. One gestures. You stand or try to. Your legs argue with the idea. You're not sure how long it's been since you've walked, but it's been long enough for your muscles to forget how. They haul you out by the arms, neither gently nor violently, just with the minimum force required to move a body that doesn't particularly want to go anywhere. You're taken down another corridor, this one slightly wider, but no less oppressive. You see nothing familiar. No markings, no doors, no signs of the outside world. It's like being led deeper into a structure that only exists to consume. Eventually, you arrive at a small stone chamber lit by a single, flickering torch. The room smells like iron, sweat, and something faintly rotten that you try not to identify. In the centre is a chair, heavy, wooden, with straps nailed crudely into the arms and legs. You know, without being told, that it is for you. You sit. One of them ties your wrists to the chair arms, the other secures your ankles. Again, they don't speak, They don't need to. Their silence says more than any threat ever could. You are here, and no one can hear you. A third man enters. He is dressed in clerical robes, the kind meant to inspire trust or fear, depending on context. His hands are clean. His eyes are not. He carries a book and a pen, which is somehow more unsettling than if he'd come in swinging a blade. He sits across from you, opens the book, and begins to ask questions. His voice is calm, measured, almost gentle, like a physician taking notes before amputation. Do you know why you're here? Have you ever questioned the authority of the church? Have you consorted with known heretics, owned forbidden texts, spoken doctrines not sanctioned by the Holy See? You try to answer. Honestly, at first, you don't know why you're here. You've never questioned the church. You barely speak to your neighbours, let alone consort with rebels. But each response lands like a stone in a well, sinking into silence, never returning. The priest writes something down after every answer, though you suspect he'd be writing the same thing, no matter what you said. Eventually, he begins repeating questions. You've already answered, this time with slightly different phrasing. It feels like a trap. It is a trap, but there is no safe path forward. Denial is resistance. Resistance is guilt. The questions stretch on. You try to stay consistent, but you're tired. Your head aches. You haven't eaten since you don't know when. And your mind, fogged by fear, hunger, and the low-grade despair that's become your constant companion, starts to slip. You contradict yourself once, then twice. You forget the exact wording of something you supposedly said 3 years ago. The priest's expression doesn't change, but the man with the rope behind you shifts his weight like someone warming up. Then the questions stop, not because they're done, but because they've gathered what they need. Not truth. Truth isn't the point, but inconsistency, hesitation, emotion. These are sins too in the hands of the right scribe. You're untied from the chair, your joints creak, your skin burns where the straps were too tight. They walk you back to your cell. You almost miss it. It smells familiar now, like your corner of hell. Time passes. How much you're not sure. You're starting to forget the rhythm of days. You sleep too much or not enough. It doesn't matter. Eventually, they come again. Same men, same route, different questions. This time, they ask about your friends, your relatives, your childhood, your reading habits. You say you don't remember. That's not acceptable. You say you were too young. That's suspicious. You say nothing. That's defiance. By the third session, you've stopped expecting it to end. The priest no longer refers to notes. He just reads back things you supposedly said and asks you to explain them. Some of the statements sound familiar, others don't. You begin to doubt your own memory. You wonder if you ever said the things they're accusing you of, or if you merely thought them once and they somehow found a way to write it down. Eventually, they stop asking questions and start making statements. You were seen speaking with known heretics. You owned a copy of a banned text. You failed to take communion for 3 consecutive Sundays. The statements are read aloud in a voice that sounds more like a eulogy than a charge sheet. You deny them. They don't argue. They just write. You realise the interrogations are no longer about discovery. They're about confirmation. You've already been found guilty. They just need you to agree. The room changes over time, subtly. The chair feels tighter. The torch burns lower. The priest's tone gets softer. You think it might be pity, but it's more likely boredom. You're not special. Just one more case, one more soul to file. The questions become more intimate, not about politics or doctrine, but about dreams, thoughts, regrets. You lie, then you tell the truth, then you lie again. The line between the two no longer matters. They don't call it torture, not here, not in the presence of robes and relics and crosses polished with the grease of 1,000 terrified palms. No, here it is a method of spiritual correction, a divinely sanctioned tool to assist you in remembering what you've conveniently forgotten. After all, Heretics rarely confess without encouragement. And if the soul is at stake, isn't a little pain worth the price? They explain this to you calmly, as if discussing the weather. The priest reads from a manuscript, outlining the necessity of extracting truth for the health of your immortal soul. The guards nod along, as though this all makes perfect sense, as though stretching your limbs to the point of snapping is no more consequential than a stern lecture. You're told that none of this is punitive, that this is mercy, that the fire, the blade, the rope, these are expressions of care. You're told to be grateful. They don't need your approval, just your compliance. The first time is almost theatrical. You're brought into a larger chamber, one that stinks of sweat and iron, and that coppery note of old blood you'll come to recognise with a shuddering kind of familiarity. The tools are already there, resting in plain view, not hidden, not covered, not even dusty. They glisten like museum pieces. Each has its place, each has a name. The rack, long and low, with its turning wheel and straps that look too well used to be decorative. The strappado, a simple rope and pulley, innocent enough until you see how it lifts the body by the arms, until the shoulders no longer belong to their sockets. The pair of anguish is less intuitive until they show you what it does. They begin with the strappado. It's always a crowd favourite. You're bound at the wrists and hoisted upward, slowly, deliberately, until your feet leave the floor and your shoulders begin to protest, then dislocate, then scream. You try to stay quiet. You really do. You bite your tongue until it bleeds. You dig your nails into your palms so hard you leave crescent moons in your flesh. But silence, like everything else, has limits. Eventually, your body betrays you. A cry slips out, then another, then more. They're not triumphant, they're clinical. Every scream is just more data, more confirmation that the process is working. You're asked questions while it happens, not because they expect honest answers, but because the performance requires dialogue. Where did you learn the false doctrine? Who taught it to you? When did you begin spreading lies you say you don't know, that you haven't, that you never would? They sigh, not in anger, but in weary disappointment, like a teacher with a particularly dim student. You are lowered. Your shoulders throb. Your breath comes in bursts. And just when you think it's over, they lift you again and again. Time isn't marked in minutes here. It's measured in stretches of skin, in the distance between your bones and the places they used to be, in how many times you can be asked the same question before your answers dissolve into gibberish. They record it all. The priest scribbles as you sob. The guards hold you like they're posing a mannequin. No one raises their voice. No one calls you names. That would require emotional investment. This isn't hatred. It's protocol. Eventually, you do confess something, anything. You invent a name, a neighbour, a cousin, someone who's already dead if you're lucky. You say you read the wrong book, that you prayed to the wrong saint, that you doubted the authority of the Pope once when you were sick and fevered. You'd say you killed God himself if it meant they'd stop. They don't. Not right away. A confession is just the beginning. Now they have to make sure you really meant it. Next is the rack. You're laid flat, tied down, at wrists and ankles. The wheel turns, slowly, with the kind of patience that suggests they could do this all day, and often do. Your joints pull one by one, like threads unravelling from a garment. At first it's just pressure, then it's something else, something sharper, more final. You feel things tear, you hear things pop. Your body makes sounds it was never meant to make. You scream again, you beg, you confess again, changing details, hoping that if you just say the right combination of lies, they'll grant you the privilege of unconsciousness. But pain is a patient tutor. It doesn't rush, it doesn't shout. It simply waits, long enough for your brain to stop resisting, long enough for your thoughts to blur into white noise, and your sense of time to flatten into a single, pulsing moment of unbearable awareness. This is your new truth now. Not innocence, not guilt, just the knowledge that you will say anything, do anything, become anything they want if it means an end to this. The pair of anguish comes later. They don't explain it because by now you've learned that explanations mean nothing. It's metal. It opens, it goes inside. You feel the pressure, then the splitting. You lose control of your body, of your dignity, of your mind. You're no longer trying to survive. You're just hoping to come apart quickly enough that you don't have to be present for it. You're returned to your cell, eventually, or at least something shaped like you is. You no longer walk so much as collapse forward, hoping your feet remember what they're for. Your body is ruined, but still functional enough to answer questions tomorrow. The door slams shut. The straw feels like glass. You don't sleep. You just close your eyes and hope the images behind your eyelids are marginally better than the ones in front of them. You dream of being someone else. Not free exactly, just not you. Someone who made the right gesture, said the right words, wore the right face. Someone who wasn't picked. But even your dreams betray you. In them, the door still opens. The rope still tightens. The priest still writes. The next day, they ask if you're ready to confess again. You ask them what else they want you to say. They smile. You'll find out soon enough. After everything you've endured, the ropes, the rack, the soft-voiced questions that were really orders, you might expect that the most terrifying part is over. It isn't. Because now comes the paperwork. You're taken, dragged really, into a different sort of chamber. This one is quieter than the others, cleaner, though not by much. The smell of blood and sweat has been replaced by candle wax and old ink. The stone floor is slightly more polished and the room is filled not with instruments of pain but with shelves, scrolls and tall desks. It has the air of a chapel that was converted into a bureaucracy and then forgot what it used to be. You're seated in a chair, hands bound in your lap, while someone much cleaner than you enters the room. A monk, or perhaps a scribe. The distinction doesn't matter. He's wearing the kind of robe that used to signal spiritual authority and now mostly indicates a person who has been spared physical labour. He doesn't look at you, doesn't acknowledge your injuries, your stench or the tremor in your hands. Instead, he opens a heavy ledger, dips his quill into an ink pot and waits. Another man enters, the one who did your last interrogation. Or maybe just the one who watched. They begin reciting your confession, aloud, slowly, clearly, in formal Latin. You recognise some of the words. Most you don't. The names are familiar, but not necessarily yours. Places you've never been are mentioned. Ideas you've never considered are carefully attributed to you. It's like hearing a biography, written about someone with your face, but none of your thoughts. The monk writes as though transcribing scripture. Every line is laid with perfect spacing, each letter adorned with graceful flourishes. He adds footnotes, cross-references, theological justifications. Occasionally, he underlines something or adds a decorative letter at the start of a new paragraph. Your agony is being turned into literature. They pause occasionally to ask you to confirm. You nod. You say yes. Sometimes you don't even understand what you're agreeing to, but refusal isn't on the table. The one time you hesitate, the priest frowns slightly and makes a note in the margin. Not a correction, a warning. A reminder that this is not a conversation. This is doctrine. And your body is just one of many vessels used to deliver it. There is something obscene about the beauty of it. The ink is rich and black, the script elegant and measured. You find yourself mesmerised by the curve of the pen strokes. For a brief moment, you forget where you are. You watch the monk's hand move like a dancer across the page, and for one terrifying second, you understand how people come to believe that this system is holy. It feels sacred in the same way a funeral sometimes feels sacred, not because of what's being honoured, but because of the ritual itself. This is where you learn the real purpose of the Inquisition. Not justice, not even terror, but order. Everything must be written. Everything must be catalogued. The body may scream and break and rot, but the paperwork must remain pristine. It's not enough to destroy you. They have to preserve the memory of your destruction. Beautifully bound and neatly summarized. They ask you for names. Again. You give them more. Real ones, fake ones, it no longer matters. You speak them with the same numb detachment you might use to list ingredients in a stew. They thank you. Not with warmth, of course, but with satisfaction. You're being helpful now. You're cooperating. You're doing your part in this sacred administrative exercise. Eventually, they bring in a parchment bearing your full confession. It is handed to you with ceremony, as though it's a gift. You are told to sign it. You can barely hold the quill. Your fingers are stiff, swollen, cracked. The ink smudges on your skin. You scrawl something that resembles your name, though you can't quite remember what it used to look like when your hands weren't shaking. They take the paper and fold it gently, like they're tucking in a child. It's sealed with wax and stamped with the sigil of the Inquisition. A cross wrapped in authority, pressed into red like dried blood. It will be stored in an archive with hundreds, maybe thousands of others. And just like that, your guilt is official. Canonized, legible. No one in the room shows hatred toward you. That would imply you're important enough to inspire emotion. They don't see you as a person. You are a case, a theological error, a line in a ledger that now balances, thanks to the miracle of confession and calligraphy. You are led out without a word. Back to your cell. Back to the darkness. You don't cry. You don't rage. There is nothing left in you to protest. The pain you felt during the torture was real, immediate, brutal. But the pain now is different. It's colder. It lingers longer. Because it's not about your body anymore. It's about what's been taken from your mind, your story, your voice. All of it's been edited, rewritten, beautified, and filed away. And yet, you know this is far from over. The confession is only the beginning of the end. Now comes the judgment, the trial, the execution of sentence, both literal and otherwise. But before that, the clerics will have their debate. The scribes will annotate your confession. Priests will consult with each other over tea and pages of your agony, gently arguing about your soul, while birds chirp in the courtyard above. You are back in your cell, but pieces of you now live elsewhere. Your words twisted into obedience, your thoughts misquoted in Latin, your guilt stamped in red and stored in a vault beneath a monastery that will one day be described as beautiful. You have been broken, translated, and archived, and if that isn't salvation, you're not sure what is. You don't see him, of course. You never saw him. Just a voice on the other side of the wall, thin and cracked like old parchment, pressed through a gap in the stone. He never said his name, never asked for yours. It wasn't that kind of conversation. It was more like two ghosts knocking on pipes in a haunted house. Just enough sound to prove you still existed. He talked about the weather, even though neither of you had seen the sky in what felt like months. He tried to remember the taste of roasted garlic, the way hay smelled in the summer, how his dog used to bark at everything that moved. You listened mostly. Occasionally, you mumbled something back, half hoping he wouldn't hear it. You didn't want to be rude, but you also didn't want to be noticed. At first, the guards didn't seem to care. Maybe they didn't hear him. Maybe they didn't mind. Maybe they were just letting him wear himself out. He spoke at odd hours, morning, night, in the dead space in between, when your brain starts unspooling. His voice was unsteady, but persistent. Sometimes he cried softly, and you'd pretend not to hear it. He said he'd been there longer than he could count. Said he didn't remember his own face. Said he used to be a cooper or a clerk, or something else that didn't matter anymore. And then one day, he stopped. No goodbye, no warning, just a silence that began in the middle of a sentence and never finished. At first you thought he was sleeping, then sick, then dead. You whispered to him. You tapped the wall once, twice, nothing. The cell next to yours had become a tomb, and you had no way of knowing when the body would be removed, or if it would be. You tried to forget about it, to focus on your own slow decay. But then came the sound. Not footsteps, not exactly. More like dragging. Something heavy being hauled along the corridor, cloth scraping against a stone, punctuated by the occasional thud. It wasn't a ceremony. It wasn't careful. It sounded like someone pulling sacks of wet grain, except sacks of grain don't have fingers that scrape against the walls. You didn't look. You didn't want to see. The slit in your door didn't show much, but it showed enough. A flash of pale skin, a broken toe, something dark smeared along the floor. You told yourself it wasn't him, that it could have been anyone, that maybe he was taken somewhere else, still breathing, still whole. But the wall stayed silent, and deep down you knew. There's a kind of terror that doesn't come from screams or blood or even pain. It comes from subtraction, from absence, from the realization that someone can vanish mid-thought, mid-sentence, and the world just moves on. No record, no prayer, just silence. You think back to the monk writing your confession, how precise he was, how elegant. And yet here is this man, whoever he was, reduced to a stain on a hallway and a room that will be scrubbed for the next occupant. After that, you don't even breathe loudly anymore, not out of fear of punishment, but something worse, fear of notice. If they remember you're here, they might remember you haven't given enough yet, haven't suffered quite enough, haven't said the right things in the right tone. Better to be quiet, to be nothing. You begin practicing invisibility the only way you can, by shrinking into the smallest possible version of yourself, and hoping no one ever thinks to open your door again. Your days become soundless, save for the shuffle of guards and the distant screams of someone else further down the corridor. You start to dread new arrivals, the fresh cries, the frantic questions, the begging, because you know how it ends. The voice gets quieter, then it stutters, then it's gone. It's always the same rhythm. Hope, pain, silence. Hope, pain, silence. Sometimes you wonder if they're doing it on purpose, not just the torture, the sequencing, the timing, giving you just enough noise from the other cells to understand the process, just enough silence afterward to understand the outcome. It's a kind of education, a lesson in subtraction. You don't need a priest to deliver a sermon when the man next door can vanish mid-word. You think about speaking again once or twice, not to anyone, just to yourself, just to hear your voice, to prove it still exists, but you can't bring yourself to do it. Every whisper feels like an invitation, like a hand raised in a crowd. You don't want attention. Attention is what got him killed. The worst part is the way your brain fills the silence. You start imagining his face, his hands. You give him a name, even though you know you shouldn't. You try to remember if he ever said anything useful, anything profound, something that might justify remembering him. But all you recall is the way he talked about bread. Not what kind. Just that he missed the smell of it. That he used to walk past a bakery on the way to church, and the scent would follow him for blocks. You hold on to that, not because it matters, but because it's all you have, and slowly you realise that being remembered isn't the reward you once thought it was. In this place, being remembered is a liability. The people they remember are the ones who suffer, the ones who disappear, the ones who get dragged past your door in bits and pieces, then replaced by someone else, with a new set of questions to fail. So you wait, you stay still. You count the bricks in your wall and pretend that silence is safety. You don't pray. Not anymore. You just try to be unremarkable, to take up as little space as possible. You become a shadow within a shadow, half real, half memory. The person you were before is long gone. What remains is just an echo trying not to echo too loudly. And in this hell of damp walls, stale straw, and the distant smell of blood, you come to understand a truth that no one tells you at trial. No one carves into official records, and no one will ever speak aloud. Sometimes survival isn't about holding on. It's about being forgotten. They come for you early, though you have no way of knowing it's morning. The door opens with its usual groan, but this time they bring robes. Not new ones, of course, just cleaner, less stained. You're told to put them on. The fabric scratches at your skin, like it's offended by your existence. The guards don't speak. They don't need to. You've learned to read silence like scripture. This is the beginning of something final. They march you through corridors you've never seen before. Some are lit by high windows, dusty slivers of daylight, cutting across stone. It's jarring after so long in the dark. You squint, you stumble, you imagine what you must look like. Bones in borrowed cloth, eyes sunk too deep to reflect anything. No one meets your gaze. Even the guards seem to avoid looking directly at you, as if your guilt might rub off, if acknowledged too fully. The courtroom is not what you expected. There's no gallery, no crowd murmuring behind benches. It's a long, cold room with a crucifix looming at one end and a row of men seated beneath it. The crucifix is beautiful, carved in painful detail, Christ mid-agony, every tendon straining, every rib accounted for. You wonder if that's the point. You're not sure if it's meant to inspire reverence or foreshadowing. 3 men sit in judgment. One wears the robes of a judge, though the law he represents bend like hot wax. One is a priest, probably the same one who supervised your confession, though it's hard to tell. They blur together after a while. The third is the most unsettling. He says nothing, wears no insignia, but his presence is heavy. His hands are calloused in a way that suggests they're used more often than his voice. You don't ask who he is, you already know. He's the one who turns verdicts into corpses. You're led to a wooden platform in the centre of the room. Not a dock exactly, just a raised square where the accused are meant to stand and attempt the illusion of dignity. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not sit. You do not ask questions. Your job, at this stage, is to exist quietly, while your fate is unwrapped like a gift no one really wanted. The trial begins without ceremony. A clerk reads a list of charges, most of which you've never heard before. They tumble out of his mouth like he's reciting mass, familiar and rhythmic, utterly disconnected from meaning. You are accused of denying the authority of the church, of speaking heretical ideas, of consorting with enemies of the faith. Some of these you've already confessed to under duress. Others are new. A few are impossibly vague. Spiritual defiance, willful doubt, corruptive tendencies. You wait for your chance to respond. It never comes. There is no lawyer, no advocate. You are your own defence, which would be a cruel joke if it weren't so pathetically routine. You are invited to speak once when prompted. You're told you may deny the charges if you wish. But be warned, the evidence is considerable, and a false denial may only harm your soul further. You open your mouth, then close it again. What would you say? That you're innocent? That you don't recognise half the words used against you? That you never believed anything strongly enough to warrant this much interest? Instead, you say the only thing left, that you are sorry. For what, you don't specify. It doesn't matter. You know how this ends. The priest nods as if you've confirmed something long suspected. The judge makes a note. The silent man does not move. The clerk continues reading. More statements, more accusations, testimonies from unnamed witnesses, reported behaviours, fragments of overheard conversations. All of it constructed into a narrative that feels suspiciously complete for something so incoherent. No one asks you what actually happened. No one questions the logic of torturing confessions out of people and then using those confessions as proof. The process is clean, efficient, and entirely unburdened by doubt. You are not here to challenge it. You are here to fulfill it. After a while, the voices blend together. Your body sways, your legs ache from standing. Your mind drifts. You try to focus on the carvings in the wall, on the texture of the wood beneath your feet, on anything that doesn't involve the word heretic, but it always returns, like an echo, a title etched into your skin with invisible ink. The sentence is not read with malice. The judge speaks softly, as if announcing a liturgical holiday. You are to be punished according to the severity of your sins, for the salvation of your soul and the purification of the community. The details are vague, the method left to discretion. There is talk of penance, of reconciliation, but you know better. There is no returning from this, no absolution that leaves your body whole. You are asked once more if you repent, if you submit fully to the mercy of God and the judgment of His church. You nod because you have no other direction left. Anything else would be defiance, and you no longer possess the strength or the audience for defiance. They lead you away, back through the corridors, past fresher prisoners and darker rooms, back to your cell, which no longer feels like a prison, but a waiting room. The trial is over. It lasted less than an hour. You spoke fewer than 50 words, and yet it has decided everything. You lie down in your corner. You stare at the wall. You try to remember what justice once felt like, if it ever did. What it meant to be heard, to be known, to be innocent. But here, innocence is just another kind of mistake. And mistakes are meant to be corrected. They wake you before dawn, not that you are sleeping. The cell has long since stopped being a place of rest and become more of a holding pattern between agonies. You sit up before they even reach the door. You knew this was coming. The trial ended. The papers were signed. And now it's time for the final act. The part with an audience. You're dressed for the occasion, if that's the right word for it. They bring you the robe, not white, not plain, but painted crudely, garishly, with red and orange flames licking up from the hem, climbing toward your chest, where a demon is sketched in childish black ink, forked tongue extended, clutching what's presumably meant to be your soul. The symbolism is not subtle. You are, for all intents and purposes, a walking sermon. They don't let you look in a mirror. You don't need one. You can see the reactions on the guards' faces, not disgust, not mockery, just detachment. One of them straightens your robe before leading you out. He adjusts the neckline like you're about to be photographed, then tightens the rope around your wrists. The sun is just beginning to rise when you reach the square. You squint against the light, and the sudden sound, bells, voices, footsteps. The square is already full. They've been gathering for hours, possibly since the night before. A festival atmosphere hangs in the air. Vendors shout over one another, selling wine, pastries, and roasted meat to people who want to fill their bellies before watching someone be emptied of theirs. The platform is tall enough that everyone can see you. You're paraded to the front, flanked by guards in polished armor and priests in gleaming robes, as though your arrival is something holy. The crowd reacts on cue. Some jeer, others cheer. A few throw flower petals, either ironically or by mistake. Children point at you and laugh. Their mothers hush them while smirking behind their hands. Somewhere, someone plays a lute. You're not alone up there. Several others stand in similar robes, each marked by different symbols, depending on their crimes. One wears a hat shaped like a dunce cap, painted with blasphemous phrases he supposedly uttered. Another has a sign hung around his neck, naming the saints he's accused of mocking. One woman stares straight ahead, unmoving, her mouth slightly open, as if frozen mid-prayer. None of you speak. There's no need. Your costumes say everything that needs saying. The clergy begin to chant, Latin, loud and rhythmic, echoing through the square like a storm rolling in. A sermon follows, long, florid, laced with metaphor and reminders of divine justice. The priest speaks of purification, of redemption through suffering, of the community's role in preserving holy order. He does not mention names. You are all interchangeable. Heretics are not people. They are positions to be condemned, roles to be filled and then removed. You try not to look at the crowd, but your eyes wander anyway. The nobles are easy to spot, brightly dressed, bored, fanning themselves with handkerchiefs perfumed against the stench of the masses. They're not here for righteousness. They're here because it's a show, one of the few events where they can mix with the lower classes without consequence. Spectacle has a way of levelling the field, if only temporarily. Someone in the crowd spits in your direction. It doesn't reach you, but the gesture lands. You don't react. You've learned not to. Every twitch, every flicker of expression is seen as guilt or arrogance or defiance. The safest face is the blank one, the one that says, "I'm already gone." A second sermon begins, then a procession of relics, then more chanting. Time stretches, the sun rises fully, sweat pools beneath your robe. You try to shift your weight, but the shackles make even minor movement feel transgressive. Your knees ache, your back tightens. A child near the front falls asleep on her mother's lap, lulled by the monotonous rhythm of ritualized hatred. Eventually, the formalities end. The priest lifts a scroll and begins reading the sentences aloud. One by one, each person on the platform has their moment. A name, a list of crimes, a punishment. The audience reacts accordingly. Gasps, applause, the occasional shout of approval. Your name is read without emphasis. The crimes are the usual ones. Heresy, apostasy, endangerment of the faithful. The punishment is execution. The method is to be determined by ecclesiastical discretion. The phrase sounds clinical, almost merciful. It isn't. You are told to kneel, you do. A priest approaches and asks if you repent. You say yes because you know what happens to those who don't. You don't expect it to save you. It's not supposed to. It's for the record, a final stamped line of obedience in a file that's already soaked in your blood. The priest places a hand on your head and murmurs something about forgiveness. You don't feel forgiven. You don't feel anything. Your senses have dulled, numbed by repetition and the long, slow erosion of self. You used to have opinions, memories, a voice. Now you have shackles and a demon drawn on your chest. The platform clears slowly. Some are led away to prison. Others, like you, remain for the final act. A wooden structure waits in the distance. Firewood has been stacked beneath it, though they haven't lit it yet. That would come later, after more prayers, after the town has had time to drink a bit more wine and feel fully righteous about what they're about to witness. You are paraded again, this time through the crowd. Closer, more intimate. People reach out to touch you, not with pity, but curiosity. Like a relic, or a warning. You keep your eyes forward. You do not speak. You do not resist. There is nothing left to resist with. You are the heretic of the hour. A role, not a person. An emblem of failure dressed up for public morality. The crowd doesn't care who you were, only what you are now. And when the fire finally comes, they'll cheer. Not because they hate you, but because they've convinced themselves it's love. Sleep doesn't come, but morning does, seeping into your bones like mold into fabric, slow and without ceremony. The air is damp, motionless. You don't remember dreaming. You just remember opening your eyes and realizing the world hasn't ended yet. And then, as expected, the door opens. A tray is placed in front of you, not handed, placed, as though you might contaminate the fingers that touched it. The meal is what you'd expect by now. A crust of bread that flakes when you pick it up, and water that tastes faintly like metal and dust. It isn't generous, it isn't symbolic. It's just there because someone, somewhere, decided the condemned ought to chew something bland before they burn. A priest enters behind the food, silent at first, his robes dry and pressed, his presence about as nourishing as the meal itself. He doesn't offer condolences. He doesn't meet your eyes. He simply takes a seat across from you, as if this is a pastoral visit and not a final inspection of a soul already processed and boxed. When he finally speaks, his voice is gentle, practiced, and hollow as the space behind a statue's eyes. You chew the bread slowly, forcing it past your cracked lips, each bite scraping against sores you didn't realize had formed. The act of swallowing burns your throat. You sip the water. It's lukewarm, slightly bitter. You finish it anyway. You think briefly of the last real meal you had before all of this began, where you were, what you ate, whether you complained about it. You probably did. People always do. It's strange how the memory of a half-stale onion stew suddenly feels like luxury. The priest prays while you eat. He recites scripture with the same energy someone might use to read a recipe. You can't focus on the words. Your ears still ring from the crowd's roar. Your joints are still swollen from restraints and cold stone. Your skin feels too tight, as if your body is trying to crawl away from itself. You know he's asking God to forgive you. You know he's speaking for your benefit. You just can't remember why forgiveness ever mattered. He finishes the prayer and asks if you have anything to confess. The question is ritual by now. You've confessed before, in the cell, on the rack, in front of the tribunal. You've given them names and deeds, thoughts you never had, sins you made up on the spot because you thought it would make the pain stop. It didn't. But you say yes. You confess again. Just to keep the pattern intact, you say you regret everything, that you beg mercy, that you fear the judgment of God. The words feel like gravel in your mouth, but you say them anyway, because that's what they want. The priest listens, nods slowly, and writes something down on a thin scrap of parchment. You don't ask what. You know it will be archived, copied, and stored in some ledgers beneath a cathedral you'll never see. Your fear, your final words, your broken obedience, they'll become part of someone else's record. A clerical entry in a history book about the righteousness of the Inquisition. They will use your whimpering as proof of moral clarity. You ask, not because you expect an answer, but because the silence has started to feel dangerous, whether this will make any difference. The confession, the meal, the prayers, whether it will change what happens next. The priest doesn't lie to you. He says what you already know. Your sentence is passed. This isn't about saving your life. It's about preparing your soul. He says it as if they are two separate things, as if the body and the soul are distinct, and what they do to one has no bearing on the other. You wonder what he would say if he were in your position, whether he'd still believe in salvation if his joints had been torn loose and his teeth knocked out for saying the wrong name at the wrong time. Whether he'd still find comfort in holy texts if he'd been paraded through a crowd, like a butcher's prize. But you don't ask. The priest isn't here for questions. He's here for closure. His, not yours. He stands when you finish the last of the bread, folding his hands in front of him, as if to keep them from touching anything unclean. He tells you there's still time to ask for a final absolution, that the church is merciful, even in judgment, that your soul may still find peace, even if your body doesn't. You nod, not because you believe him, but because the words seem to expect that gesture. You've learned by now that refusing is a form of rebellion, and rebellion, even quiet, polite rebellion, always invites more pain. He places 2 fingers on your forehead, murmurs a final blessing, and then steps away. The guards reappear, silent and familiar, the way bad memories always are. They don't shackle you this time. There's no need. You're not going anywhere. Your legs barely hold you upright, and even if they did, there's nowhere to run. They lead you back to the antechamber. You're told to wait there. The execution is being prepared. Firewood stacked, papers signed, crowd fed, and sufficiently pious. You sit on a stool and stare at the wall. The rough surface is stained with the soot of 100 others who waited like this. You imagine them, faces you'll never know, thoughts you'll never hear, lives swallowed by this same machinery. You wonder if any of them believed it. The forgiveness, the mercy, the promise of paradise after all of this. You don't know if you believe in hell anymore, but if you did, you suspect it looks a lot like this. A room with bad bread, a tired priest, and a door that only opens in one direction. You are called one last time. You stand. Your robe still stinks of fear and old sweat. You walk out slowly, your breath shallow, your heart beating only because it hasn't remembered to stop. No one gives you peace, they just give you an ending. By the time the moment comes, you've already died a dozen smaller deaths. Piece by piece, your dignity, your voice, your name, all whittled down until what remains can be disposed of neatly, like broken kindling. The square is ready again just as it was before, but this time, you're not a part of the sermon. You are the finale. The air smells different, not of incense or bread or the sweat of packed crowds, but of oil. The kind used to prime torches, the kind that clings to skin. There is a nervous energy in the square, though none of it belongs to you. The people shift and whisper, pressed shoulder to shoulder, anxious for something to happen. Not out of fear, out of boredom. It has taken too long to get to the part where someone dies and their children are starting to fidget. You're led to the centre platform, which has been repurposed from its earlier role as a pulpit to something far more practical. Execution doesn't require eloquence, just elevation. Wood creaks beneath your feet as you're positioned at the centre, under a heavy beam, or in front of a pyre, or beside a chopping block, depending on the method that's been chosen. You weren't told which. They don't tell you until the very last moment, not because it matters, but because dread is its own form of punishment. The garrote waits for you like an old acquaintance, its twisted cord looped through iron supports, bolted into the back of a chair. If this is your sentence, you'll be seated facing the crowd, hands bound, throat aligned with the coil. The executioner, dressed in plain brown, will turn the handle slowly, carefully, until your breath collapses inward and your skull cracks with a sound that doesn't echo nearly as loudly as your last gasp. The death is not instant. It's efficient, yes, but only in the way wringing a cloth is efficient. You will thrash, you will try to scream, your eyes may rupture. Some in the crowd will look away, most won't. Or maybe it will be fire. The wood has already been stacked dry and tight and treated with oils to ensure it catches quickly and burns hot. The executioner doesn't light it until after the last prayer is spoken. There's ceremony to be upheld, even in this. You're tied to the stake, arms pulled behind you, smoke already curling in your nose before the flames begin their slow ascent. Your robe, heavy with sweat and filth, offers no protection. Your skin goes first, crackling at the edges like overcooked meat. Then the pain sharpens into clarity, and you scream, because how could you not? There are no quiet martyrs here, only flailing reminders of God's wrath. The crowd doesn't quiet, they lean in. Some cross themselves, others cheer. Children are hoisted onto shoulders, so they don't miss a thing. And then there's the axe, merciful, at least in theory. Swift, final, unusual for heretics unless you are noble born or useful enough in life to warrant a cleaner death. If this is your fate, the platform will be smaller, more intimate. A low block is placed before you. You're told to kneel. Your head is positioned carefully, your hair swept aside, if it's in the way. The executioner doesn't speak. He just lifts the blade and waits for the signal. With luck, it will be one strike. If not, it might be 2 or 3. Some bones are stubborn. Either way, your body will twitch reflexively, trying to correct a problem it no longer has the tools to solve. You don't know which death is yours until it begins. That's part of the design. They want you quiet, compliant, hollowed out by fear so thoroughly that your body moves without needing to be told. You aren't given last words. That would imply you have something left to say. The priest gives the final prayer in your place. You're not expected to join in, just to listen, just to serve. In the final moments, time distorts again, the same way it did in the cell, in the torture chamber, during the trial. Everything narrows, the noise fades, or maybe your ears stop bothering. You can't tell. Your mouth is dry, your knees shake. You try to remember a prayer, or a song, or your mother's voice, anything that might be louder than the silence growing inside your chest. And then it happens, not the pain, not yet, just the beginning of the end. The first pull of the garrote, the first crackle of fire, the shadow of the blade as it arcs through the air. You want to think you'll face it with dignity, but there is no dignity in this. There's just heat, pressure, suffocation, a choked-off scream, a body rebelling against its own expiration. The idea of grace is for the witnesses, not for you. No matter the method, it ends the same way. Twitching limbs, slumped shoulders, a silence that stretches just long enough for the crowd to feel cleansed. You are not a person anymore. You are an example, a moral footnote smouldering in the morning air. The crowd disperses slowly, reluctantly. Vendors call out to sell one more drink before the blood dries. Someone jokes about the smell. A child asks why the bad man didn't just say sorry earlier. The answer is not given. It isn't needed. Your body is left on display longer than necessary. Ashes cooling, rope swaying, a clean cut staining the block. This is not for you. This is for everyone else. Because this was never just an execution. It was a message, and you were the punctuation. Your usefulness doesn't end with your final breath. Death in the hands of the Inquisition is not a conclusion. It's a transition from living heretic to object lesson, from a breathing, bleeding soul to a case file. Even your corpse, whether buried, burned, or simply dumped, still serves a function. Before your body cools, the process resumes. Officials, well-fed and unbothered, begin cataloguing your belongings. A man who never met you walks through your home with gloved fingers and a bored expression, turning over bowls and folded cloth like a merchant haggling with absence. Anything valuable, books, furniture, livestock, cookware, is seized. Not because it's needed, but because heresy carries a financial penalty. Rope and fire cost money. Paperwork needs ink. The church expects compensation, and your family, whatever's left of it, is expected to provide it. If you had savings, they're gone. If you had debts, they vanish. Unless you owed the church, of course. In that case, interest continues to grow long after your body has stopped doing the same. If you rented a room, your landlord will be advised to cleanse it. Not spiritually, just legally. Scrub the name, repaint the walls, forget you ever lived there. Your family becomes collateral damage. Spouses, siblings, children, all tainted by proximity. Their neighbours stop making eye contact. Merchants refuse them credit. Friends disappear. They'll be expected to apologise without being told how. Their grief is not permitted to be public. To defend you is to risk becoming you. So instead, they learn to flinch silently. To stop saying your name, to act like it never mattered. If your confession was deemed adequate, thorough, sorrowful, compliant, you might receive a quiet burial, somewhere unmarked, somewhere far from consecrated ground. A priest may mutter a prayer over the shallow grave, and then you're gone, covered over, not forgiven, contained. But if you hesitated, if you screamed something inconvenient, as the fire caught or the blade fell, then you're not buried at all. Your ashes are scattered like waste, your bones left for dogs or tossed into ditches. There's no dignity in deviation. Your name becomes shorthand, a warning, a line in a sermon about the dangers of pride or doubt or silence. Children will hear stories about you, though not with your real name, just the heretic, the one who refused to repent, the one who thought he knew better, You become a moral, never a memory. Years pass. The square where you died hosts marriages, festivals, more executions. No one knows your blood soaked the stones. The bowl you once used for stew might one day hold a stranger's morning porridge. Your house is sold. Your belongings repurposed. Nothing of you remains where you once lived. Even the ghosts have forgotten you. In the vaults beneath the chancery, your file is stored, stamped, indexed, complete with a confession you barely remember giving, and a sentence that was decided long before the ink dried. A clerk might reference it while preparing a new case. A priest may quote you from the pulpit. I recant, they'll say you said. I repent. It doesn't matter whether it's true. The record has no obligation to be accurate, only useful. And the work continues. A new prisoner is brought in before your ashes have finished drifting. Another name whispered. Another soul to be processed. A merchant's daughter who read the wrong text. A widow who cried too loudly during Mass. A child who asked if the saints ever made mistakes. The charges aren't written yet, but they will be. The wheels turn. The structure endures. The priest sleeps soundly. Another soul judged. Another danger removed. The flock is a little more obedient. The streets a little quieter. Somewhere, a man raises a glass to the Inquisition's continued vigilance. Someone else prays in gratitude for the kingdom's purity. The blood doesn't stain their robes. It stains the paper, and paper can be filed away. Your family keeps shrinking into itself. A window is broken one night. No one asks who did it. There's no recourse, no restitution. Speaking up only draws attention, and attention is a dangerous currency now. They stop attending gatherings. They change their names. Over time, even their grief becomes soft-edged and foggy. Not because they've healed, but because they've had to. No one marks your grave because there isn't one. No stone, no relic, just an absence, the kind that hovers without form or weight. The system doesn't remember individuals. It remembers categories. You are not recalled as a man or a woman or a voice. You are referenced as a case, a lesson, a function that has been fulfilled. There is no footnote for fear, no margin for suffering, just check boxes. Confessed, yes. Recanted, number sentence carried out. Efficiently. Somewhere, a priest sharpens his sermon. A scribe sharpens his pen. The rhythm resumes. A rope is cleaned. A chair is wiped. Your suffering did not break the machine. It barely slowed it. The Inquisition does not mourn its casualties. It multiplies them. You are not a martyr. You are just someone who made the wrong face at the wrong moment. Who paused a second too long before agreeing. Who said, I don't know, when certainty was required. You didn't start a war. You didn't write a book. You didn't plan to change the world. You just lived. And that was enough. It is tempting to wonder if it mattered. Your death, your screams, your final thoughts, if the pain you endured taught someone something. But the truth is simpler and colder. You were not meant to be remembered. You were meant to be replaced, and you already have been. That's the end of tonight's slow, suffocating descent through the gears of the Spanish Inquisition, a world where suspicion was truth, silence was strategy, and salvation came with a rope or a matchstick. Thanks for enduring this grim little journey with me. If you're still awake, feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about which parts would have broken you first. The questioning, the waiting, or the quiet knowledge that your greatest legacy is being forgotten on purpose. Sleep well,